But we've got to develop tidal, solar, tidal especially important in Atlantic Canada, and we're not there yet. And we got to bring that on. It requires a lot of investment. We've got to develop our hydro. We've got to invest in smart grids so that our renewable sector can plug into the grid and get their products to market. And this is an area where I think we can lead and we can develop. And it's a place where the fact that we're rich in fossil fuels and rich in hydro has made us slow. Because we've had those advantages, we haven't invested where we need to. But that's where the future is, and we've got to go there.
Hi, my name is Mike Kadeski. I'm a Bachelor of Management student here. I'd just like to know your stance on your support for the State of Israel, as well as your ideas on combating the war on terrorism.
Thank you. Canada has been a strong supporter of the State of Israel since the foundation of the state. And the Liberal Party has been since the foundation of the state. For real strong reasons that have to do with the Holocaust, that have to do with the fact that Israel is a democracy, the fact that it's a free society. You go to Israel and it's very noisy, it's very loud, and no, it's not a perfect society. Everybody knows it's not. But strong support for the State of Israel, but it has to go hand in hand with a strong support for a two-state solution. That is, a state for the Palestinian people. There are two rights in contention, and Canada has never chosen between the two. We've always said both rights to statehood and land must be met. But the conditions are clear. They have to live in peace side by side. The Palestinians have to recognize the right of Israel to exist in perpetuity. Their neighbors have to accept the right of Israel to exist in perpetuity. And the Palestinian state has to be a viable state, a real state. So that's the kind of core position, and it's not changed very much since the 1940s. On the war on terror, we're all living through that right. I think everybody in this room can imagine how you'd feel pulling into Detroit Airport 7 minutes from touchdown, and there's a fire in row 19. You think, holy smoke, this is the world we're in. A 23-year-old, your age, so intoxicated with hatred that he's willing to blow himself up and other innocent civilians to make a political point. So, what do you do about that? We're going to go into the world of full body scanning. You know, we're all going to be in these machines and someone is going to see me naked. It's not a pretty sight. And that's what we're going to have to do to stay safe. But it's very important that we have a national discussion about how far we're prepared to go. We're a diverse, multicultural society, and we're deeply proud of the fact that we've made a unity out of all the different national and racial and religious origins in this room. And a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian. We do not want to get into racial profiling. We do not want to have two lines. And when you fight terror, we have to fight terror with a respect for constitutional law, human rights, and constitutional rights. So we have to fight with one hand tied behind our back. And it's only when we admit those limits and we stand up for democratic principles and human rights that we win the battle. Because the key thing with that 23-year-old Nigerian, the thing that worries me and should worry you, is this was a young man who had access to the best post-secondary education in the world. He was at Imperial College London in an institution comparable to this one. And somewhere, he got this virus of hatred. And so we all have an obligation, talking to our friends, talking to our neighbors, talking to that silent student who doesn't say very much in class, to open them up, get them to talk. Make sure that no one gets walled off into that world of hatred and world of violence. Because by the time he's on that plane with that explosive sewn into his underwear, it's way too late. The time to stop that 23-year-old is in these institutions. Here, in your cafeterias, in your dorms, in your classrooms, to say, okay, there's some lines no human being can cross, which is blowing up an airline for any political cause under any circumstance.
Thank you.
Before we take the next question, I'd just like to ask if you're lining up for the microphone over there, please line up by the door. We're having a bit of a, well, it's chaos over there, quite frankly. Next question.
Hi, my name is Matt Edmonds, and during my studies, I focus a lot on political participation and kind of the importance that you have an educated citizen you're willing to keep government accountable. And then I look at kind of the last few years in Canada, and you see that there are a lot of cases, like with the last proroguement, and even this one, where the public discourse kind of revealed that a lot of people supporting the proroguement didn't quite understand what proroguement was or what sort of effect it would have on governance in Canada. Then you see lots of other cases where people just don't really seem to understand what a coalition government is. And then you have Stephen Harper going further and hand-picking which news agencies get coverage and limiting the ability of his elected officials in his caucus to talk to the public. So I think if you have a prime minister who's trying to keep people in the dark in order to get away with doing some of the things he wants to do, that's very problematic. I'd like to know what sort of role you think the Liberal Party has, other parties, the public in general, in trying to make sure that Canadians are truly aware of what's happening so they can make a responsible and educated response to keep government accountable.
Thank you for that. I think that I began my talk by talking about low participation rates. I talked in answer, I think, to this young man's question about the ways in which when you shut down Parliament, you gamble. You make a gamble on the ignorance and cynicism of the Canadian public. And I think that's the wrong gamble to make. And I think my adversary has discovered that. It doesn't pay in the long term to think the Canadian public don't get it. Right? You're right, there are things they don't understand. Prorogation, what's that? But they do understand shutting down Parliament. They know what that means, and they don't like it one little bit. On the coalition issue, I think there were constitutional difficulties about that. But I think Canadians came to a mature view that on balance they didn't want a coalition government, on balance. And I listened to them and I said, let's not do this. And then I think one of the things you're talking about is the role of a political leader in terms of talking to the public and informing the public and engaging with the public about our system and how it works. And that's why I'm here. And as I go further, I just want to keep doing this because I think that's how it works. But you've got a responsibility as well. As a citizen, you've got to go out there when you're in the bar, when you're in the supermarket, when you're in the laundromat, and someone says something that's just completely false account of what our system is. That's what all that political science comes in some use for. Provided you tell them that political science is not a science.